Time now for my political panel, Liberal MP Jason Falinski and Shadow Minister on the Labor side of politics, Andrew Giles. And some bells are going off, so I'm imagining someone has to run out. Are we okay? OK, we're OK so far. Jason, let's start with you. Why did the government go against practice and not refer Christian Porter to the Privileges Committee?
Thanks, PK. Nice to see you. And Andrew, always nice to see you too. The answer to that question is we didn't go against practice. What has been asserted in the media is that the Speaker recommended that it be referred to the Privileges Committee. That wasn't actually the case. The Speaker actually made a ruling that that the motion had precedent. The reason that the government voted against that precedent motion was that the Leader of the House, Peter Dutton, had already referred the matter to the Privileges Committee, and Mark Dreyfus had referred Christian Porter directly to the Privileges Committee the day before. So for the purpose of a political stunt, we weren't willing to get involved in the whole situation. Christian Porter, in the matter of blind trust and anonymous people, such as Senator Hanson-Young, who had one of her defamation cases funded by crowdfunding, and people like Mickey Mouse came forward to help fund that, has been referred to the Privileges Committee for actually how the pecuniary interest register works in this country to ensure that we have oversight, transparency and integrity in the system.
Andrew Giles, you've heard the government's defence. They want it to be broader. They mention the other kind of issues around donations. What's Labor's answer on that, on trying to make it more broad rather than just talking about Christian Porter?
Well, there are separate issues, Patricia. I mean, it is absolutely extraordinary what happened yesterday. For the first time in 120 years, a decision by the Speaker of the House that there was a prima facie case to be answered to at the Privileges Committee was rejected on the floor of the House. And by way of example, not all that long ago, in a similar set of circumstances, Labor members voted for referral by Speaker Bronwyn Bishop of a former Labor member. We've always followed this practice, and every member should follow the practice. Because while there are broader issues perhaps about how the register could operate, and I'd be very interested in hearing from the government as to what they want to have done, what we are seeing here is an extraordinary standard, a standard that opens up the suggestion of undue influence over every single member of the House of Representatives, a standard that enables $1 million to be received without any capacity for the Australian people to know where it has been received from. That's not a standard that Labor can accept. And once again, it shows why we have been so determined to pursue this government over its abject failure to deal with integrity issues, including, after more than 1,000 days, its failure to put into practice a National Anti-Corruption Commission with teeth.
Jason Falinski, wouldn't it be easier for the government if Christian Porter just came forward and revealed who made the donations, and also it's the right thing to do?
Well, look, often the easiest thing to do is not the right thing to do. So I just need to make something very clear. What the Parliament did yesterday was not reject a recommendation by the Speaker to refer a matter to the Privileges Committee. What the House did was it voted against bringing on a debate about the matter. One of the reasons we did that is that Christian Porter and the incident or the situation that we're talking about has been referred to the Privileges Committee by Mark Dreyfus, and that had occurred 24 hours previously. So I don't want people listening to this program to think that these issues will not be investigated by the Parliament, will not be investigated by the Privileges Committee, because that's not the case. In the specific case of Christian Porter and the blind trust that was used, this is very difficult and unusual circumstances, and I'm talking on the television station which he was suing because he believed that his reputation had been damaged falsely and incorrectly. He spent $1 million to get to the steps of the court. There were people who donated to that who I believe did not feel like they wanted to do so openly because they felt that they would be subjected to retribution by some of the people involved on the other side of that case. Now, whether that is fair, whether that is true or not, yeah, I don't know. Well, but they are the circumstances which we have here.
But that's the same thing. Political donations are the same. You know, you don't want people to know who you're politically donating to, yet still we know that it's the right thing to do to disclose it, right? So, you know, it doesn't really pass the test, that argument. Yeah, if you're apprehensive, well, don't do it. That's really the only answer.
Well, I mean, one of the things that we want to investigate, or that Peter Dutton, and I understand Tony Burke and Anthony Albanese also are in favour of investigating this, is how publicly elected officials can actually defend themselves against false claims. So it's well known that Peter Dutton is spending a considerable amount of money, of his own money, and he openly says that he's in the very fortunate circumstance of being able to defend himself, but he will miss that amount of money against someone who made some extraordinary claims about his character, which I don't think even the Labor Party would dispute was completely out of order. But that is one of the problems that we face in this country, and it's a major one, which is the cost of justice in this country is completely and utterly out of control.
Yeah.
And so people who just simply want to actually defend their good name and fame find themselves in a situation where they have to choose between bankruptcy and actually doing that through the court system.
So that's your job as the federal government, as state governments, to make that reform. You can't say, oh, we won't disclose because it's expensive. I mean, I don't know how that can possibly stand up. But I've got to park it, because if we don't spend any time on climate change in Glasgow, I think we look really weird, to be honest. Andrew Giles, I think we're nearly at the end of the week and they're still poring over this. Why is Labor waiting until after Glasgow on your side to release your targets? I mean, surely you know what you think needs to be done.
Well, you talked about not looking weird. Australia looks weird in the eyes of the world as we are confronted by the prospect of a Prime Minister who thinks he gets a pat on the back from simply deciding to go to Glasgow, while his party and the Nationals are incapable of formulating a position. Unfortunately, Patricia, we're not in a position to go to Glasgow and commit to medium-term targets. That's a matter for the Australian government. We know those targets need to demonstrate more ambition. And frankly, I find it extraordinary and galling to hear from government members their sense of satisfaction about their record in emissions reduction, when that record is down to, in large part, the record under the former Labor government, the impact of the RET, which they tried to abolish, and the only thing that's really happened under them to reduce emissions has been the recession that's been a party alongside the global pandemic. So they've got no grounds for satisfaction there. They should be committing to higher targets in the medium term, as we have said, and Australians will hear from us about our medium-term targets in the not-too-distant future.
Jason Falinski, the Nationals are still holding off. We had yesterday, for instance, Bridget McKenzie saying it's going to get ugly if the Prime Minister goes ahead. What are you thinking as someone who's been pushing for this?
Look, I think that this is an incredibly difficult thing for any country to do. Australia faces some very specific and difficult tasks as well, in that we are a net energy exporter, and we're a huge net energy exporter. We're a huge exporter of minerals. We're a huge exporter of agricultural goods. Those three things put together in most other nations would make this task incredibly difficult. I reject what Andrew's saying. Most of the reduction did not occur under the Labor government. And yes, the recession, the pandemic, which meant that we had to close large parts of our economy, did help last year, but we have been on a clear trajectory to reducing our targets by 20%. I would also argue that the Labor Party's refusal to tell us what they would do, given that they're also running around saying that they're expecting an election in December, is an argument for them to be permanently in opposition. If they want to be the alternative government, then front up and tell us what we're doing.
Hang on a minute. You're the government, and
yes,
we've got less than 2 weeks till Glasgow, and you haven't told us what you're going to do.
I know, it's exciting, isn't it, PK?
No, but you can't say they don't deserve... You deserve to be in opposition by that standard.
You failed your own test,
We're making this exciting for everyone at home.
No, it's not exciting.
It's banal
for everyone at home, because we've heard about this for too long, and you know it.
Sure, and this is a really difficult thing to do. And anyone who says otherwise, and for the National Party and for a lot of rural and regional Liberals who represent communities that will be adversely affected, or whose impact of net zero by 2050 is uncertain, this is something that they need to work through. And I'm not sitting here saying by any stretch of the imagination that this has been, that we've negotiated this, or that this policy has gone in a straight line. But I'm more confident at the end of this week than I have ever been that we will go to Glasgow Glasgow with a commitment to net zero by 2050, and that will be extraordinary, that we have managed to do that both as a country and as a community and as a society. What rests upon us here and now in this moment is to make sure in that commitment that we don't leave anyone behind, and that's what is going on at the moment in federal parliament.
Yeah, but you are frustrated, right? You must be.
Of course, I get frustrated in this. If you're in politics and you're not frustrated, you're not listening. I mean, that's the nature of the beast.
And you said, oh, it's exciting. I know you were being kind of like, you know, flippant, but honestly, you accept that your voters in your electorate are telling you, get on with it, right?
Absolutely. And what I say to my electorate is we are getting on with it, but it is easy for us on the northern beaches of Sydney because the upside for us is enormous. The downside is very small. For a lot of other places, like in Gladstone, this is a very serious issue for them, and government needs to assure them that any transition to a net zero will not see them being left behind. And that's what we're attempting, well, that's what we're doing right now.
I'm going to give you 30 seconds for a right of reply, Andrew Giles, because we're out of time.
People are being left behind. We are forsaking opportunities now for jobs of the future, and we're putting at risk our children's future. It isn't exciting. It is worse than frustrating. It is an absolute debacle. Liberals voted against a net zero legislated commitment in the parliament this week. The Resources Minister refused to demonstrate his support for net zero by 2050 in the parliament today.
We did not vote against
He did. You did,
no,
and you've had a very good go, Jason.
You guys
You've had a very good go, Jason. You can let me make a couple of points, including recognising that the Resources Minister, Keith Pitt, today seems to not understand the existence of batteries. Australia's future, our children's future, is being held hostage by a fringe dweller, a group of fringe dwellers sitting outside the cabinet, it appears, despite many of them being members of it. It is an absolute disgrace, Patricia, and the Liberals, the modern Liberals, should show some endeavour and stand up for their constituents and our future.
And we're out of time. Thank you to both of you. Liberal MP Jason Falinski, Labor MP Andrew Giles joining us there.